Hello, and welcome back to Highwater Pass. We have a lot of ground to cover today and not a lot of time to do it, so without further ado, let's talk about our first animal. Right now, we are currently looking at the Przewalski's horse enclosure. They're one of the last wild horses left in the world. You would think that there would be more, but horses form this kind of strange evolutionary bottleneck, which is what makes them such good template animals to teach evolution. However, because of their use as domestic animals, most every variety of horse humanity could get their hands on has been tamed down and bred into the varying looks we see today. The Przewalski's horse is unique in that it has remained its own thing. Sadly, they're critically endangered in the wild, so breeding projects are currently one of our best ways of sustaining the species. Highwater Pass naturally contributes to the breeding program. I'm particularly proud of this viewing ledge. As you walk past the horses, you come right up to the edge and they tower over you for just a moment. They're fairly small as horses go, but that doesn't diminish the fact that they are large, wild herbivores. This is basically the closest you can get to these animals safely, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. Moving on to the dholes. These were a bit of a problem animal. I included them primarily because we don't yet have coyotes in game, which is a real shame as they're unique animals and a North American staple. By contrast, dholes live across most of South Asia, especially in India and southwestern China, but going all the way down into the Southeast Asian island network. They have highly flexible pack sizes, and are not nearly as territorial as other canids like wolves. In Thailand, their packs rarely exceed 3 members, while in other areas they can go as high as 40, however the average is about 5 to 15. They also have high membership fluidity, with pups moving from one pack to another with very little issue. There's also some potential genetic evidence that during the Pleistocene era they either split off from or intermixed with the African wild dog. However, after thousands of years of isolation, the two have become distinct species. Their pack tactics mirror the African wild dog, however, as they don't deliver a killing blow. They're also primarily sight hunters, and prefer to hunt either during the day or on full moons when they have the most light. Before a hunt, they will often do a sort of pre-hunt party, and during the chase they can continue the hunt for several hours. They're definitely something you don't want to meet in the wild, but here in the zoo we have the luxury to see them up close safely. Next we move on to cougars. Well, the Zoopedia calls them cougars, but they also go by mountain lion and puma interchangeably, with the Florida puma sometimes being recognized as its own subspecies. Fun fact, I actually had a puma visit my daycare, and before you panic, it was intentional, he was contained, and we had a lot of fun watching him play with his bowling ball. Naturally, as this is the largest and most widespread big cat native to my country, I've always had a soft spot for them. I like to believe that our cougar here in the zoo is something of an ambassador, and that he would join one of the many cougar ambassadors around America. However, for this section I want to focus on two, Jasper at Como Zoo and of course the famous P-22. Jasper is a 4-year-old cougar as of this video's posting, who lives at Como Zoo in Minneapolis, along with his lifetime friend Ruby. They are opposing sexes, but they're not mates. Why? Well, I'll link the full article below because Jasper's just a really cool dude. But basically, the zoo regulation standard regarding cougars discourages captive breeding. This sounds unusual at first glance, but it has to do with just how many cougars live in America. Because so many female cougars are killed in the wild, it leaves a dearth of cubs orphaned. Zoos and wildlife conservation programs are better focused at raising these wild cubs for release, rather than breeding internally and adding to their numbers that way. It's an unusual twist on expectation and shows just another way that conservation efforts can help maintain a species. Jasper and Ruby are perfect ambassadors for this, as that's how they came to be at Como Zoo in the first place. But there's another important thing I should mention about Jasper. He's blind. But does this stop him? No, not at all. Jasper was born with a genetic condition that caused him to suffer retinal failure, and recently the veterinarians had determined that he'd lost all blood flow to his eyes. Rather than euthanize him, as the blindness was not detrimental to his quality of life, they decided to remove his eyes and allow him to live many more long and healthy years as a critical ambassador. As senior zookeeper Jill Arizar puts it, his blindness is something people can relate to. We're all animal people here, but for those who don't quite have that empathy, seeing a blind animal is something we understand because that's something we humans also experience, either directly or indirectly. It creates a bond that might not otherwise exist. And of course, his blindness does not stop him from living a healthy and fulfilled life. He learned a long time ago how to navigate his habitat, even as his vision deteriorated, and though he might hesitate on some drops, he still navigates them well. Ruby also understands on some level that he doesn't see well anymore and helps him to navigate the tricky parts. We're running out of time here, but I want to briefly mention P-22, as he's probably the most famous cougar in the United States. And sadly, we lost P-22 at the beginning of 2023, but as he was a wild cougar who managed to live for 14 years, he lived an insanely long life. P-22 was born in the Santa Monica Mountains, and after his father chased him out of the territory, which is normal, he somehow managed to cross 2 separate Los Angeles highways and make his way to Griffith Park, home of the now famous Hollywood sign. He became a frequent sight for residents, although he rarely gave them any trouble. There was one incident where he accidentally got stuck underneath a house, but that was quickly resolved with no injuries to either him or any of the human residents. Otherwise, he's most famous as a study subject and unofficial city mascot. Researchers learned a great deal about cougars by just watching him live his life. This last year, however, age sadly caught up with him. It was a combination of various organ failure, age, and urban congestion that led to an accidental collision with a car. It didn't kill him, but it did lead to sensory damage and a cracked skull, and ultimately the vets determined they couldn't save him. However, his story doesn't end. Even in death, he was an ambassador to the people of LA. We tend to think of Los Angeles as peak Americana, but the Chumash, Tattaviam, and Gabrielino peoples, also known as the Tongva peoples, still call this area home long after colonization happened. As I understand it, they consider mountain lions to be something like relatives and teachers, and so naturally the big cats are very important to their culture. When P-22 died, they immediately set into gear to make sure the cougar was given his proper funeral rites. However, this desire came into conflict with the same researchers who had been studying P-22. They wished to keep his body as research material. However, they finally gave in, and P-22 was given full burial rites earlier this year. Even in death, P-22 continues to inspire people around the world and act as ambassadors for these fantastic animals. However, we are truly out of time, so the river, we visit the African rock penguins next. The penguins don't fit into the sister zoo narrative, however they are a fairly common animal in most North American zoos in their own right. There are a few reasons for this. First off, they're one of the smaller species of penguin, which is great if you need an economical space filler. The second reason, of course, is that they are a warm weather penguin. Not only is this quite rare, but it also makes them easy to keep. Most penguins require a dedicated cold house, which is difficult to maintain and extremely expensive to run. However, the African penguins don't require this, and our particular penguins are part of the zoo's many breeding programs. They're considered endangered. And while they do serve as prey animals for a variety of other creatures, that's actually not the reason. As usual, it's humans, and this is fixing to get a little bit alarming. So, the problems are threefold. The first is that, until as recently as the 1970s, penguin eggs were widely consumed as a delicacy. This practice involved, well, unfortunately, clearing out all the eggs on a beach, and then, a few days later, going through to collect the fresh eggs. And this would effectively destroy a generation, and then save all the new eggs for human consumption. Naturally, it didn't take long before this wiped out the colony, and the process had to begin again. Thankfully, though, this practice is basically completely ended, and we no longer have this issue. However, that's not the end of the problems. The next is, of course, the collection of bat guano from their native islands and coastlines. This material is used by the penguins to construct their nests, but unfortunately humans have decided that they needed it to make fertilizer. This is less than ideal, as bat guano is notoriously hazardous due to its high bacteria count. This is neither good for the humans or the penguins. Thankfully, though, better fertilizers will help to reduce this problem. And lastly, we have to talk about the oil spills. Unfortunately, anytime that there's an oil leak or an oil spill, whether it be from a tanker or a driller, this is going to impact the local coastline, and that includes the penguins. Hence, breeding programs are not only helping to grow the population, but spread awareness and reduce the instances of all three of these problems. From here, we move just a bit south to our California sea lions. Despite the name, these sea lions can actually be found all up and down the American West Coast, and are iconic to the region. Both sea lions and seals can be found on the Pacific coast, but the main difference between a sea lion and a seal are their tails. Seal tails taper to sort of a mermaid fin, while sea lions retain their back leg flippers and they splay out to the sides. Seals are very skilled in the water, but terribly bulky on land, whereas sea lions are comparatively fast and agile on land, but of course they struggle a little bit more in the water. Also quite interesting, despite their label in Planet Zoo, there are actually 3 separate species of California sea lion. One lives, of course, in the Gulf of California, the other is native to the more general Pacific coast, and the third species actually makes its home on the Galapagos Isles. There was a 4th species native to Japan, but sadly they're now classified as extinct. As a sea lion, it's unsurprising that they should eat fish and squid, but they also eat krill, which I frankly did not expect. They're also normally quite fearful of humans, but thankfully ours have adapted well to the foot traffic. Just south of the sea lions are our giant otters, another animal I've gotten to see in real life. The Dallas World Aquarium keeps them in a rather spacious 2-story tank, where they swim up and down their waterfall slide. And they are enormous, probably as big as you are, assuming you're no taller than 6 feet, and they're extremely powerful. Amusingly, this means that Highwater Pass is home to both the largest otter and the smallest. I should also mention that yes, their faces really do look like that. While most otters have sort of a cute face with wide eyes and pointed nose, giant otters are more like a pug or a mastiff, short and broad. They are also the apex predators of their river homes, which is no mean feat. considering that home is the Amazon River. While some animals like caimans will attempt to prey on pups, the adults have basically no confirmed cases of predatory killings. However, historical and anecdotal evidence suggests that they may occasionally fall prey to caimans, jaguars, and cougars. This is not to say that they're completely safe within their habitat, though. Piranha make up a decent portion of their diet, but of course that fish will attempt to nibble on them as well. And the rivers are often teeming with electric eels and stingray, which are both potentially dangerous if the otter is caught unawares. Otherwise, they rule their homes as kings. And that brings us to the end of the episode. Next week, we're going to be going at an absolutely breakneck speed again, so I hope to see you there. Until then, have a great week and happy Friday.